Clara Whitmore's knees hit the frozen ground. She couldn't feel them anymore. Couldn't feel anything except the terrible weight of her baby going still against her chest. "Mama!" 6-year-old Lily grabbed her sleeve. "Mama, get up!" But Clara couldn't. 5 months of running. 5 children slowly starving. And now 20 miles from nowhere, the snow was winning. "Mama?" Lily whispered, her little voice cracking. "The church lady said even God don't want families like ours. Is that why we're dying?" Before Clara could answer, hoofbeats broke through the wind. Before we continue, drop a comment with your city or country so I can see how far this story travels. And if you want to see how this desperate family finds hope, subscribe and stay with me until the very end. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The morning everything fell apart started like any other. Clara was stirring oatmeal over the fire when she heard the horses. Too many horses. Coming too fast. "Daniel." She kept her voice calm. "Take the children to the root cellar." Her 15-year-old son didn't argue. He'd learned not to argue 5 months ago when his father's body came home draped over a saddle. "Mama, what's happening?" Margaret clutched baby Ruth tight. "Go with your brother. Now." Clara grabbed Thomas's rifle from above the door. Her hands were steady. Thomas had taught her to shoot before he taught her to love him. She'd always figured she'd never need either lesson. She was wrong on both counts. 3 men rode into the yard. Clara recognized the one in front, Rufus Crane, Victor Shaw's right hand, the same man who'd stood watching while her husband bled out in the dirt. "Mrs. Whitmore." Crane tipped his hat like they were meeting at church. "Mr. Shaw sends his regards." "Get off my land." "That's the thing, ma'am." Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ain't your land no more. Bank called in the loan. You got till sundown to clear out. My husband paid that loan. According to who your husband's dead, Mrs. Whitmore. His word don't count for much these days." Crane pulled a paper from his coat. "Got the documents right here, legal and proper. Mr. Shaw's taking possession of this property effective immediately." Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. "My husband worked this land for 15 years. We built this house with our own hands. And you think a piece of paper—" "I think," Crane interrupted, his voice going cold, "that a widow with 5 mouths to feed ought to think real careful about her next words. Mr. Shaw's being generous giving you till sundown. Most men would have burned you out already." "Most men aren't murderers." The word hung in the frozen air. Crane's horse shifted nervously. "That's a dangerous accusation, ma'am." "It's the truth. You killed Thomas. Everyone knows it. Everyone's just too scared to say it." Crane leaned forward in his saddle. "Your husband had an accident. Tragic thing. But accidents happen to folks who don't know when to quit." He paused. "They happen to widows too, and to children." Clara felt ice slide down her spine, not from the cold. "Sundown, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't make me come back." They rode away, and Clara stood frozen on her porch until she couldn't see them anymore. Then her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the steps, the rifle across her knees, and tried to remember how to breathe. "Mama," Daniel's voice. Clara looked up to find all 5 children standing in the doorway, Margaret holding Ruth, Samuel gripping Lily's hand. Daniel in front, trying so hard to look like a man when he was still just a boy. "We heard," Daniel said quietly. "What are we going to do?" Clara looked at her children. 5 faces. 5 reasons she couldn't fall apart. 5 reasons she had to find a way to survive. "We're leaving," she said. "Start packing. Only what we can carry." They left at midnight, 3 hours before Crane's deadline. Clara wasn't taking chances. The wagon was small. The horse was old, and everything they owned fit in 2 trunks and a carpet bag. 15 years of marriage, 5 children, 1,000 memories reduced to what could be hauled by one exhausted mare. "Where are we going?" Samuel asked from the wagon bed. "Aunt Helen's, in Montana." "That's 300 miles, Mama." "I know, Daniel. In winter. I know. The silence that followed said everything. They all knew the odds. But staying meant Shaw. Staying meant more threats, more danger, maybe more graves. At least the road gave them a chance. The first week went better than Clara expected. The weather held. The horse kept moving. The children didn't complain even when the food ran low. But the second week brought trouble. The horse died on the 9th day. Just stopped walking, lay down in the traces, and closed its eyes. Clara sat beside her for an hour, stroking her mane, before Daniel finally said what they were all thinking. "We have to walk now, Mama." So they walked. Pulled what they could on a makeshift sled, left the rest behind. One trunk became a carpet bag. Then the carpet bag became a bundle. Then the bundle became whatever they could carry in their arms. Clara carried Ruth. Daniel carried supplies. Margaret carried Lily when the little girl's legs gave out. Samuel carried himself, because at 9 years old, that was all he could manage. They walked, and the world got colder. The town of Bitter Creek appeared on the 15th day like a mirage. Wooden buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, people walking on actual streets. "Thank God," Margaret breathed. "Mama, we made it. We can get help." Clara wanted to believe her, wanted to walk into that town and find warmth and food and anyone who would look at her children and see something other than a burden. She should have known better. The general store was their first stop. Clara pushed through the door, Ruth bundled against her chest, the other children trailing behind like ghosts. "Please," Clara's voice came out cracked and rough. "My children haven't eaten in 2 days. If you could spare anything bread, anything, I can work to pay it back. I can clean, sew, cook." The woman behind the counter took one look at them. Her eyes counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't give handouts." "I'm not asking for a handout. I said I'd work. Do you have money?" Clara's hand shook as she reached into her pocket, pulled out the last coins she owned. 37 cents. It's all I have, but 37 cents. The woman's laugh was sharp. For a woman with 5 children, that won't buy you a day's worth of food, let alone lodging. Where's your husband? Dead. The word fell like a stone. The woman's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. A widow, with 5 children, and 37 cents. She shook her head. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for your troubles, but I can't help you. Try the church. They handle charity cases." Charity cases. Clara felt the words like a slap, but she gathered her pride off the floor and herded her children back outside. "The church, Mama." Daniel's voice was tight. "We'll try the church." The church was a small wooden building at the end of the main street. Clara climbed the steps rehearsing what she would say. Surely the church would help. Surely God's house would have room for 5 hungry children. She pushed open the door. A man in black stood at the altar arranging hymnals. He turned at the sound. "Can I help you?" "Reverend, please." Clara stepped forward. "My children and I are traveling. We've lost everything. Our horse died, our food ran out, and we need—" "How many children?" The question cut her off. Clara blinked. 5. But 5. The Reverend's eyes moved over them, counting, calculating. "And the father? My husband was killed 5 months ago." "Killed?" "Yes." "And you've been traveling alone since then?" "A woman with 5 children." There was something in his voice, something that made Clara's stomach tighten. "We had no choice. Our home was taken." "Perhaps," the Reverend interrupted, "there was a reason your home was taken. Perhaps the Lord works in mysterious ways. Perhaps He's testing you." Clara felt her temper flare. "My husband was murdered, Reverend. My children are starving. If this is a test, I'd like to know what kind of God—" "Careful, Mrs. Whitmore." "Mrs. Whitmore." The Reverend's tone went cold. Bitterness is a sin, and so is questioning the Lord's plan. Perhaps if you'd been more prudent. Prudent? 5 children is excessive. Perhaps if you'd shown more restraint, you wouldn't find yourself in such desperate circumstances. Clara stared at him. Her children stared at him. Even baby Ruth, bundled in her shawl, seemed to sense the cruelty in his words. I'm asking for bread, Clara said quietly, not a sermon. And I'm offering salvation, not bread. The Reverend turned back to his hymnals. There's a stagecoach that passes through tomorrow. I'd suggest you find a way to be on it. Bitter Creek has no room for families of your size. Lily tugged on Clara's sleeve. Mama, what does excessive mean? Clara took her daughter's hand. It means we're leaving, sweetheart. They walked out of the church, and Clara didn't let herself cry until they were out of sight of the steeple. Then she found a quiet spot behind the livery stable, sat down in the snow, and let the tears come. Margaret sat beside her, said nothing, just put her arm around her mother's shoulders. Mama, Lily's small voice, the churchman was mean. Yes, baby, he was. Why doesn't anyone want us? The question broke something in Clara's chest. She pulled Lily close, burying her face in her daughter's hair. Some people, Daniel said roughly, are too stupid to know treasure when they see it. Clara looked at her oldest son, 15 years old, with his father's jaw and his father's stubborn eyes. He was trying so hard to be strong for them. Daniel, I mean it, Mama. We don't need people like that. We don't need anyone. We've got each other. We've got each other, Samuel echoed. Each other. Margaret agreed. Even Lily nodded, fierce and determined for all her 6 years. Clara looked at her children, starving, freezing, abandoned by everyone who should have helped them, and still somehow believing. She wiped her eyes. All right, we keep walking. There's another town 40 miles north. We can make it. In this weather, Mama, Margaret's voice was gentle. With Ruth. Clara looked down at the baby in her arms. Ruth's lips were blue. Her breathing was shallow. Clara hadn't wanted to admit how bad it was getting. We don't have a choice. They made it 3 miles before the blizzard hit. 1 minute the sky was gray but calm. The next the world disappeared in a wall of white. Wind tore through Clara's thin coat. Snow blinded her within seconds. Hold hands, she screamed. Everyone hold hands. Don't let go. They staggered forward. Daniel leading. Clara in the middle with Ruth. Margaret dragging Lily. Samuel stumbling somewhere behind. I can't see Mama. Lily's wail barely cut through the wind. I can't see anything. Keep moving, just keep moving. But moving was getting harder. The snow was up to Lily's waist. Samuel had fallen twice. Even Daniel was slowing his young strength, no match for nature's fury. Clara didn't know how long they walked. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the next step, and the next, and the next. Then Daniel stopped. There's something ahead, a building. Clara squinted through the snow. He was right. A shape in the white. A barn, maybe. Or a house. It didn't matter what it was. It was shelter. Go. Everyone go. They stumbled toward it. A barn. Old, abandoned, half the roof missing. But the half that remained blocked the wind, and right now that was enough. They collapsed inside. All of them. Gasping, shaking, too frozen to speak. Clara pulled the children close, wrapped her body around as many of them as she could. Tried to share warmth she didn't have. Mama. Margaret's voice was thin. Ruth's not moving. Clara looked down at the baby in her arms. Ruth's eyes were closed. Her face was gray. Her chest wasn't rising. No. Clara stripped off her coat, wrapped it around Ruth, rubbed the tiny body. No, no, no. Ruth. Ruth, baby, wake up. Please wake up. Nothing. Daniel, start a fire. Anything that burns. Now. But what was there to burn? A few rotten boards, some old straw. Daniel tried his frozen fingers fumbling with matches, but the wood was too wet, the straw too damp. I can't get it to light, Mama. I can't. Keep trying. Clara held Ruth against her chest, breathed into the baby's face, prayed to a God who'd stopped listening months ago. Please, please, not her. Take me, but not her. Not my baby. Mama. Lily pressed against her side. Mama, is Ruth going to heaven? Clara couldn't answer, couldn't speak, could only hold her baby and rock back and forth waiting for the end. Mama! Lily's voice again smaller now. The church lady said God don't want families like ours. Is that why Ruth is dying? Because God don't want us? Something cracked in Clara's chest. She looked at her 6-year-old daughter. Blue lips, hollow eyes, still asking questions even while freezing to death. God wants you, Clara whispered. God wants all of you. Don't you ever believe otherwise? Then why isn't he helping us? Clara had no answer. The wind screamed outside. The cold crept in, and Clara Whitmore, 34 years old, mother of 5, widow of 1 good man, prepared to watch her children die. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, cutting through the storm, coming closer. Daniel! Clara's voice was hoarse. Someone's coming. Daniel grabbed a piece of wood. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. A figure appeared in the barn doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in snow. For a moment, Clara thought it was Death himself come to collect them. Then the figure spoke. Lord Almighty. A man's voice, low and rough. There's children in here. He stepped inside, pushing back his hood. A hard face, gray eyes, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Not a handsome man, not a soft one. His eyes swept over them. Over Daniel with his pathetic weapon. Over Margaret and Samuel huddled together. Over Lily too cold to be afraid. Over Clara clutching a baby who might already be gone. Clara waited for the judgment. The counting. The calculation about how much trouble they were, how many mouths to feed, how much burden they represented. Instead, the stranger dropped to his knees in front of her. The baby. His voice was urgent. Give me the baby. No. Ma'am, I ain't gonna hurt her. But she's dying and I've got a fire and warm milk at my ranch 3 miles from here. You can fight me or you can let me help. Your choice. Clara looked at Ruth's gray face, then at the stranger's gray eyes. How do I know I can trust you? You don't. His gaze didn't waver. But right now, I'm the only chance that baby's got. Clara made her choice. She handed him her daughter. The stranger took Ruth with surprising gentleness, tucked her inside his coat against his chest. Then he whistled sharp and piercing, and a horse appeared in the doorway. A big horse. Strong. Can you ride? He looked at Clara. I can do whatever I have to do. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. The little ones can go on the horse with me. The older children follow on foot. It ain't far, but we need to move now. He looked at Daniel. Can you do that, son? Can you help me get your family somewhere safe? Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't call me son. You ain't my father. Didn't say I was, but right now, we're all your mama's got. So I'm asking, can you do this? A long pause. Then Daniel nodded. Good. The stranger lifted Lily onto the horse, then Samuel. Then he mounted himself, Ruth still tucked against his chest. Ma'am, you and your girl follow close. Don't stop for anything. Clara grabbed Margaret's hand. What's your name? The stranger looked down at her from the horse. Jacob Hartley. Why are you helping us, Mr. Hartley? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her children, at the desperation written in every line of their bodies. Because once, he said finally, someone didn't help when they should have, And I've been trying to make up for it ever since." He turned the horse toward the door. "Now move. That baby ain't got much time." They made it to the ranch in less than an hour, though it felt like years. Clara remembered it in fragments. The endless white. Daniel and Margaret struggling through drifts. Samuel crying on the horse. Lily going silent, which was worse. And Jacob Hartley cutting through the storm like it was nothing, like nature itself didn't dare stand in his way. The house appeared out of the blizzard, like a fever dream. 2 stories. Stone chimney with smoke rising. Light in the windows. Inside. Jacob dismounted, Ruth still in his arms. "All of you. Now." They stumbled through the door into warmth. Actual warmth. Clara's frozen skin screamed at the sudden change, but she didn't care. She couldn't care. Because Jacob was laying Ruth on a table near the fire, stripping off the baby's frozen clothes, wrapping her in blankets. "Is she?" Clara couldn't finish the question. "She's alive. Barely." Jacob didn't look up. His hands moved with surprising skill, rubbing the baby's limbs, checking her pulse. "Got a woman in town, midwife knows about these things." "But the storm. What can I do?" "Warm milk. There's a cow in the barn, probably already milked. Kitchen's through there. Heat it. Not too hot. Body temperature." Clara moved without thinking. Found the kitchen. Found the milk. Hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the pot. "Mama." Margaret appeared beside her. "Is Ruth going to be okay?" "I don't know, baby. I don't know." She heated the milk, brought it back to Jacob, watched as he dipped a clean cloth in the liquid and touched it to Ruth's blue lips. Nothing. Again. Nothing. "Come on," Jacob muttered. "Come on, little one. Don't quit now." Clara prayed. Beside her she heard Daniel praying too, and Margaret, and Samuel, even Lily, her small voice whispering words half remembered from a church that had turned them away. Ruth's lips moved. Just a twitch, a flutter. Then her tiny mouth closed around the cloth and she sucked. "There." Jacob's voice was rough with relief. "There she is." Clara felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on the floor, and for the first time in 5 months she sobbed without trying to stop. She cried for Thomas, for her home, for every door that had slammed in her face, for every person who'd looked at her children and seen a burden instead of a blessing. She cried, and her children gathered around her, and Jacob Hartley pretended not to notice as he fed her baby one precious drop of milk at a time. When she finally looked up, wiping her face, she found him watching her. "Thank you." The words were inadequate. "Mr. Hartley, I don't know how to—" "Don't thank me yet." His voice was gruff. "Storm's not letting up. You're stuck here for the night at least. Maybe longer. We won't be any trouble. We can sleep in the barn." "You ain't sleeping in any barn." Jacob's tone brooked no argument. "There's bedrooms upstairs, fire in the hearth, food in the kitchen. Your children are going to eat, get warm, and sleep in actual beds." "That clear?" Clara stared at him. Why what? Why are you helping us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Everyone else." Her voice cracked. "Everyone else looked at us and saw a problem. Too many children. Too much trouble. What do you see?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. His gray eyes moved over her children. Daniel still defensive. Margaret still protective. Samuel still shivering. Lily watching him with those huge eyes. Then he looked at Clara. "I see a woman," he said slowly, "who walked through hell to keep her family together. I see children who've been through more than most adults could handle, and I see—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I see a family that deserves better than what the world's given them." "That doesn't answer my question." "Maybe not." He turned away, heading for the kitchen. "There's stew on the stove. Get those children fed. We can talk about answers later." Clara watched him go, felt something she hadn't felt in 5 months. Hope. Fragile, terrifying, probably foolish, but hope nonetheless. Bed. The stew was the best thing Clara had ever tasted. She knew objectively that it was simple fare. Beef, potatoes, carrots, onions. Nothing fancy. But watching her children eat, really eat, not just nibble at scraps, felt like witnessing a miracle. Samuel finished his first bowl in under 2 minutes. Margaret ate with her eyes closed, savoring every bite. Even Daniel, who'd been suspicious of everything since they arrived, cleaned his plate twice. Only Lily held back, watching Jacob across the table with those enormous eyes. "You ain't hungry?" Jacob asked her. Lily shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. "She's scared," Samuel announced through a mouthful of bread. "She thinks you're gonna make us leave once the storm stops." "Samuel?" Clara's voice was sharp. "That's not—" "It's true, Mama. She told me." Jacob set down his spoon. He looked at Lily with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. Something soft underneath all that hardness. "Come here," he said quietly. Lily didn't move. "I ain't gonna bite." Jacob's voice gentled in a way that surprised Clara. "Just want to tell you something." Slowly, carefully, Lily slid off her chair and walked around the table. She stopped about 3 feet from Jacob, ready to bolt. Closer. She took one more step. Jacob crouched down so he was at her eye level. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily. That's pretty. Like the flower." He paused. "Lily, you know what I see when I look at you and your brothers and sisters?" She shook her head. "I see brave kids, the bravest I ever met." Jacob's rough voice was steady. "You walked through a blizzard. You didn't quit. You didn't give up. That takes guts." Lily's lower lip trembled. "The churchman said we were too many. He said God was punishing Mama for having too many kids." Clara's heart cracked. She hadn't realized Lily had heard that part. Jacob's jaw tightened. "The churchman was a fool. You know what I think?" "What?" "I think God sends big families to people who got big hearts. And I think your mama's got the biggest heart I ever seen." He reached out, slow and careful, and tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "You ain't too many. You're exactly right. Understand?" Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She hugged him. Just threw her arms around his neck and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to drown her. Jacob froze. His hands hovered in the air, uncertain, like he'd forgotten how human contact worked. Then slowly, he hugged her back. "All right," he said gruffly, clearing his throat. "All right now. Eat your stew before it gets cold." Lily pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Yes, sir." She went back to her seat and ate every bite. Clara watched Jacob return to his own food, his face carefully blank. But she'd seen the crack in his armor, the flash of something raw and aching behind those gray eyes. This man had lost someone. She was certain of it now. She just didn't know who. The storm raged for 3 days. 3 days of being trapped in Jacob Hartley's house, eating his food, sleeping in his beds, watching her children slowly come back to life. Ruth's color returned. Samuel started laughing again. Even Daniel's shoulders began to uncoil, though he still watched Jacob like he was waiting for the other boot to drop. Clara tried to make herself useful. She cleaned. She cooked. She mended clothes that had been torn during their journey. Anything to feel like less of a burden. On the second day, she found Jacob in the barn, fixing a broken harness. The wind was still howling outside, but the barn was warmer than expected. He'd rigged up a small stove in the corner, keeping the animals comfortable. "You don't have to hide out here, you know." Jacob didn't look up from his work. "Ain't hidin'. Got chores. Chores that could wait until the storm passes." He was quiet for a moment. His hands kept moving, threading leather through buckles with practiced ease. Your boy don't trust me. Daniel. Yeah, Daniel. Jacob finally met her eyes. He looks at me like I'm gonna hurt you, like I'm planning something. He's protective. His father... Clara stopped, swallowed hard. His father was killed 5 months ago. Daniel's been trying to be the man of the family ever since. He doesn't know how to stop. He's 15. I know. That's too young to carry that kind of weight. I know that too. Clara hugged herself against the cold. But I couldn't stop him. He needed to feel useful, needed to feel like he was doing something instead of just watching everything fall apart. Jacob nodded slowly, set down the harness. My father died when I was 14. Took me years to figure out I didn't have to replace him. Just had to honor him. How'd you figure it out? Someone told me. A shadow crossed his face. Someone who ain't here anymore. Clara waited, didn't push. She'd learned that some stories couldn't be forced out. They had to be offered. Jacob picked up the harness again. Her name was Mary, my wife. The words landed like stones in still water. We were married 3 years. She was... He stopped, started again. She was pregnant when she got sick. Some kind of fever. Doc said there was nothing he could do. She died in my arms and the baby died with her. Clara's chest ached. Mr. Hartley, that was 4 years ago. His voice was flat now, drained of emotion. Spent the first 2 years drunk. Spent the next 2 working myself half to death. Figured if I kept moving, kept busy, I wouldn't have to feel it. Did it work? No. He looked at her directly. Nothing works. You just learn to carry it. Clara thought about Thomas, about the way his laugh used to fill their kitchen, about the way he'd hold her at night and tell her everything was going to be all right. Yeah, she whispered. You do. They stood in silence for a long moment, 2 people bound by losses they couldn't explain and grief they couldn't escape. Then Jacob cleared his throat. Storm should break by tomorrow. You can stay until your baby's stronger. After that, we'll leave, I know. Clara straightened her spine. You've already done more than anyone else. I won't impose further. That ain't what I was gonna say. She blinked. It wasn't... I was gonna say, after that we need to talk about arrangements. Jacob's expression was unreadable. I got a ranch to run. Too much work for one man. And you got 5 kids who need a roof and regular meals. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice. He set down the harness again. You can leave when the storm breaks. Try your luck somewhere else. Or you can stay. Work for room and board plus a wage. The older kids can help with chores. The younger ones can just be kids. Clara stared at him. Why, you don't know us. We're strangers. You were strangers 3 days ago. Now you're people who've been eating at my table and sleeping under my roof. Jacob shrugged. Way I see it, that makes you neighbors. And neighbors help each other. People don't help widows with 5 children. They look for reasons to turn them away. I ain't people. The words were simple, matter of fact, but they hit Clara like a freight train. I need to think about it, she managed. Take your time. Storm ain't done yet. He went back to his harness and Clara stood there for a long moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Someone had offered her hope, real hope, without conditions, without judgment, without that look in their eyes that said she was a burden to be managed. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she went back to the house and did both. The storm broke on the 4th morning. Clara woke to silence, actual silence, not the constant howling of wind that had become background noise. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Ruth, and went to the window. Blue sky, bright sun, miles of white stretching in every direction. Beautiful and terrifying. Because now she had to decide. Mama! Clara turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, her 12-year-old face pinched with worry. What's going to happen to us? Clara pulled her daughter close. Come sit with me. They sat on the edge of the bed and Clara told Margaret about Jacob's offer, the job, the roof, the chance to stop running. What do you want to do? Margaret asked. It's not just about what I want. This affects all of us. But what do you want? Clara was quiet for a moment. I want to stop being afraid. I want you kids to have a home again. I want Ruth to grow up somewhere safe instead of dying on a frozen road. Then why are you hesitating? Because last time I trusted someone outside our family, your father ended up dead and we lost everything. Margaret took her mother's hand. Mr. Hartley isn't like those men, Mama. I can tell. He's rough and he doesn't smile much, but he's good. I think he's really good. Since when did you become so wise? Since I had to be. Margaret smiled sadly. We've all had to grow up fast. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. Too fast. I'm sorry for that. Don't be sorry. Just don't let being scared make us miss something good. Out of the mouths of children, Clara thought. Wisdom in places you'd never expect. The family meeting happened after breakfast. Jacob made himself scarce heading to the barn to check on the animals. Clara gathered her children around the kitchen table and laid out the situation. Mr. Hartley has offered us a place to stay, she said. We'd work for room board and a small wage. It's not charity, it's employment. For how long? Daniel's voice was suspicious. A week, a month, until he gets tired of us. He didn't put a time limit on it. There's always a limit, Mama. There's always a catch. Daniel leaned forward. What does he want really? Because nobody helps a widow with 5 kids out of the goodness of their heart. People always want something. Daniel. Clara kept her voice calm. I understand why you're scared, but I'm not scared. I'm realistic. Daniel's jaw tightened. Papa trusted people. Look where that got him. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Your father trusted the wrong people, Clara said quietly. That doesn't mean everyone is wrong. How do you know this man isn't? I don't. Not for certain. Clara looked at each of her children in turn. But I know we're out of options. I know Ruth almost died in that blizzard. I know we have 37 cents and nowhere to go. We could try Aunt Helen's. That's 200 miles through winter, Daniel. We barely survived 40. Silence. Samuel raised his hand. I like it here. The food is good. There's more to life than food, Samuel. Not when you've been hungry. More silence. Margaret spoke up. I think we should stay. At least through winter. We can reassess in spring. Me too, Samuel agreed. Lily nodded vigorously. I like Mr. Jacob. He's nice. Daniel turned to the one person who hadn't spoken. What about you, Mama? What do you really think? Clara closed her eyes, saw Thomas's face in her mind, heard his voice the way he used to say, Don't let fear make your choices, Clara. Let hope. I think, she said slowly, that your father would want us to take the chance. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up from the table. Fine, we stay. But I'm watching him, Mama. And the first sign of trouble, we'll deal with it together, like we've dealt with everything else. Daniel nodded once, then walked out. Clara heard the back door open and close. He'll come around, Margaret said. He just needs time. Clara hoped she was right. She found Jacob in the barn, shoveling hay into the horse stalls. He looked up when she entered, but didn't stop working. We've decided to stay, Clara said. If the offer still stands, it stands. There need to be ground rules. Jacob leaned on his shovel. I'm listening. My children are my responsibility. You're not their father, and I won't have you trying to be. Wouldn't dream of it. We work for our keep. This isn't charity. If there's something we can't do, tell me, and we'll figure out how to earn it another way. Fair enough, And Clara hesitated. This was the hard part. There will be talk. A widow living with a bachelor. People will assume things. Let them assume. It's not that simple. My children have already faced enough judgment. I won't have them. Mrs. Whitmore. Jacob's voice was firm but not unkind. I've lived in this territory for 10 years. I know what people say and what they think, and I stopped caring about either a long time ago. I can't afford not to care. I have 5 children whose futures depend on our reputation. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. There's a small cabin about 100 yards from the main house. Used to be the foreman's quarters when my father ran cattle. It needs work, but it's got a good roof and a fireplace. Your family could stay there. Separate enough to quiet the gossips. Close enough to be practical. Clara hadn't expected that. You'd give up a whole cabin. It's sitting empty, has been for years. Jacob shrugged. Might as well be useful. That's very generous. It's practical. Like you said, ground rules. He picked up the shovel again. I'll start clearing it out today. Should be livable by tomorrow. Clara watched him work for a moment, this strange man who kept surprising her. Mr. Hartley, why did you really help us the truth? He stopped shoveling, didn't turn around. Mary used to feed every stray that came to our door. Dogs, cats, travelers. Didn't matter. She'd say, Jacob, you never know when you're entertaining angels. His voice roughened. I thought that was foolish, naive. I'd tell her the world doesn't reward kindness. It punishes it. What did she say? She said that was exactly why the world needed more kindness, not less. Jacob finally looked at her. When I found you in that barn, 5 kids half frozen and a baby dying in your arms, I heard her voice in my head clear as day. She said, don't you dare ride past Jacob Hartley. Don't you dare. Clara's throat tightened. You helped us because of your wife. I helped you because she was right. Jacob turned back to his work. The world does punish kindness, but that don't mean we should stop being kind. It just means we got to be strong enough to take the punishment. Clara stood there for a long moment, watching him shovel hay, like it was the most important task in the world. Then she went back to the house to tell her children about their new home. The first week was the hardest, not because of the work. Clara was used to hard work, but because of Daniel. Her oldest son had withdrawn into himself, doing his chores with grim efficiency, but refusing to speak more than absolutely necessary. Jacob noticed. He didn't say anything, but Clara saw the way his eyes tracked Daniel across the yard, the way he gave the boy space, while still assigning him meaningful tasks. On the 8th day, something shifted. Clara was in the cabin putting Ruth down for a nap when she heard shouting from the barn. Her heart seized. She grabbed her shawl and ran. She found Daniel and Jacob facing off in the center of the barn. Daniel's face was flushed with anger. Jacob's expression was stone. What's going on? Neither answered. Daniel, what happened? Daniel's voice cracked. He was showing me how Papa used to rope. The same way. The exact same way, and He couldn't finish. The words dissolved into something raw and broken, and suddenly Clara understood. Jacob had inadvertently touched a wound that hadn't healed. Daniel, I'm fine. Daniel wiped his face roughly. I'm fine, He looked at Jacob with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. Why do you know how to do that? Why do you know all the things he knew? Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on a hay bale, moving slowly like he was approaching a spooked horse. Because there's only so many ways to work a ranch, he said, and men who work ranches learn the same skills. Your father and me, we never met, but we probably would have got along. We were doing the same work, loving the same land, just in different places. Daniel's jaw trembled. I don't want you to be like him. I don't want anyone to be like him. I'm not trying to be. Then stop. Daniel's voice broke again. Stop being good at things he was good at. Stop being patient when I'm angry. Stop making Mama smile when she thinks nobody's watching. Clara felt the blood rush to her face. She hadn't realized Daniel had noticed. Jacob didn't react to that last part. His focus stayed on the boy. You want me to be somebody you can hate? That would be easier, wouldn't it? Daniel didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. I get it. Jacob's voice was rough but kind. After Mary died, I wanted to hate everybody. Hated God for taking her. Hated the doctor for not saving her. Hated myself for not doing something, anything. He paused. Hate's easier than hurt, but it don't fix nothing. It just makes you lonely on top of everything else. I'm not lonely. I have my family. And your family needs you whole, not hollowed out by anger. Jacob stood up. I ain't your enemy, Daniel. I ain't trying to replace your father. I'm just a man with too much work and not enough hands. That's all I am. Daniel stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not acceptance. Not yet, but the beginning of it. The roping, he said finally. Can you show me again? Without... He struggled. Without me losing my mind about it. I can try. Okay. Daniel picked up the rope he'd thrown down. Okay. Clara slipped away before either of them noticed her. She had tears on her face and didn't want to explain them. Progress came slowly after that, but it came. Daniel started asking Jacob questions about ranch work. Margaret took over the kitchen and discovered she had a talent for baking. Samuel appointed himself official chicken feeder and took the job seriously enough that Clara had to hide her smiles. Even Lily seemed to bloom her constant chatter, filling the spaces that had been silent too long. And Ruth grew stronger every day. Her cheeks filled out. Her crying became lusty and demanding instead of weak and thin. She started reaching for things, smiling at faces, being a baby instead of a survival statistic. 2 weeks after the storm, Clara stood on the cabin porch and watched her children playing in the snow, actually playing, not just surviving, and felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe she thought, maybe we're going to be okay. Then Jacob rode into the yard with a letter in his hand and an expression like thunder. What is it? He dismounted, handed her the envelope. This was waiting at the post office. Someone's been asking about you. Clara's blood went cold. She recognized the handwriting on the address. Victor Shaw. He knows we're here, she whispered. How does he know we're here? Small territory. Word travels. Jacob's jaw was tight. What did this man do to you? He killed my husband, stole our land. Clara's hands shook as she opened the letter. She read the contents, read them again, felt the world tilt sideways. What does it say? Clara looked up at Jacob, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the old fear crawling back. He's coming, she said. He's coming here, and he wants to finish what he started. Jacob took the letter from Clara's trembling hands and read it himself. His expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes, something cold and dangerous that Clara hadn't seen before. He doesn't say exactly, just that he's coming. Clara's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. He says he has unfinished business, that I have something that belongs to him. What could you possibly have that he wants? I don't know. We left with nothing, just the clothes on our backs and... Clara stopped. Her face went pale. Thomas's journal. Journal? My husband kept records. Everything. Every transaction, every meeting, every conversation. He was meticulous about it. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the outline of the small book she'd kept hidden in her dress since the day they fled. I grabbed it without thinking. It was the last piece of him I had. And what's in it? I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to read it. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Every time I tried, I'd see his handwriting and I'd just fall apart. Jacob held out his hand. May I? Clara hesitated. This was Thomas's private thoughts, his words, his memory. Sharing it felt like a betrayal even now. But Shaw was coming. And whatever was in that journal might be the only thing standing between her family and destruction. She reached into her dress and pulled out the small leather-bound book, placed it in Jacob's calloused palm. He opened it carefully, like he understood the weight of what he was holding. His eyes moved across the pages, and Clara watched his expression shift from careful neutrality to something else entirely. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Clara. If we're going to face this together, you should call me Clara." "Clara." Jacob looked up from the journal. "Your husband wasn't just keeping records. He was gathering evidence. Dates, names, witnesses. He documented everything Shaw did. The land grabs, the threats, the bribes to local officials." He paused. "There's enough here to hang Victor Shaw 3 times over." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Thomas knew. He knew what Shaw was doing, and he was trying to stop it. Looks like he was building a case, planning to take it to the territorial authorities. Jacob's jaw tightened. Shaw must have found out. That's why he killed your husband. And that's why he's coming here now. He knows you have this journal, and he knows what it means. Then we should run. Clara reached for the book. "We should leave tonight before he gets here. I won't let my children." "Running won't help." Jacob's voice was firm. "Shaw found you once. He'll find you again. Men like him don't stop until they get what they want." "Then what do we do?" Jacob closed the journal, met her eyes directly. "We fight. Fight against Victor Shaw. He has money, men connections. He owns half the territory." "He don't own me." Jacob's voice was quiet but steel hard. "And he don't own this land. My father homesteaded this ranch before Shaw was anything but a jumped-up cattle thief with delusions of grandeur. I ain't afraid of him." "You should be. He kills people who get in his way." "I know." Jacob's eyes held hers. "But I also know that journal changes everything. With evidence like this, we don't need to fight Shaw with guns. We can fight him with law." The law didn't help Thomas. The law stood by while Shaw took everything we had. Local law is bought and paid for, but territorial law is different. There's a judge in Cheyenne Harrison. He's been trying to bring down Shaw for years. Never had enough evidence. Jacob held up the journal. "Now he does." Clara stared at him. "You'd do that. You'd go up against Shaw for us. I'd do that for what's right." Jacob paused. "And for you. For your children." Something passed between them in that moment. Something Clara couldn't name and wasn't ready to examine. She looked away first. "Shaw will come before we can get to Cheyenne. He's probably already on his way." "Then we prepare." Jacob moved toward the door. "I'm going to town. Got friends who owe me favors. We'll need eyes on the road warning when Shaw gets close." "Jacob." Clara grabbed his arm. "Be careful, please." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. When he looked back up, his expression had softened just slightly. "I ain't planning on dying, Clara. Got too much to live for now." He was gone before she could ask what he meant. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Jacob brought back 2 men from town ranch hands he'd worked with years ago, men he trusted with his life. They set up watch posts on the main road, rotating shifts, so someone was always keeping eyes on the horizon. Daniel threw himself into the preparations with a ferocity that worried Clara. He spent hours practicing with the rifle Jacob had given him, hitting targets with an accuracy that would have made Thomas proud and terrified. "You're not going to be in the line of fire," Clara told him on the second night. "When Shaw comes, you're taking your brothers and sisters to the cabin and barricading the door." "Like hell I am." "Daniel Thomas Whitmore." "Papa died because nobody stood with him." Daniel's voice cracked. "You think I'm going to hide while you and Mr. Hartley face those men alone? What kind of man would that make me? A living one." "There are worse things than dying, Mama." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it. But looking at her son, she saw Thomas staring back at her, the same stubborn jaw, the same righteous fire in his eyes, and she knew there was nothing she could say that would change his mind. "If things go bad," she said quietly, You get your siblings to safety. Promise me that. No matter what happens to me or Mr. Hartley, you get them out." Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. "I promise." Clara pulled him into a hug, holding on longer than she probably should have. When she finally let go, there were tears on both their faces. "Your father would be proud of you," she whispered. "I hope so, Mama. I really hope so." On the third night, Jacob found Clara sitting on the cabin porch, staring at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" He sat down beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cold night air. "Too much thinking. About Shaw. About everything." Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "What happens after this? Even if we win, even if Shaw goes to prison, what then? We can't stay here forever. This isn't our home." "It could be." Clara turned to look at him. His face was in shadow, but she could feel the weight of his gaze. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "I ain't good with words, Clara. Never have been. Mary used to do the talking for both of us." He paused. "But what I'm trying to say is these past weeks, having you here, you and your children, this house feels like a home again. First time in 4 years. Jacob, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I know you don't feel the same. I know you're still grieving Thomas, and I ain't trying to replace him. But if you wanted to stay, not as an employee, but as, I don't know what to call it, something more, something real, I'd be honored." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to consider it. Not now. Not until all this is over and you've had time to think without a threat hanging over your head." Jacob finally looked at her, and in the starlight, his gray eyes were almost silver. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I'd be good to you. Good to your children." "You've already proved that." "Then give me a chance to prove more." Clara didn't know what to say. Her mind was spinning, her heart pulling in directions she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you. Of losing again. Of letting myself care about someone and having them ripped away." "I know." Jacob's hand found hers in the darkness. "I know exactly what that's like. But Clara, I'd rather have something real and risk losing it than spend the rest of my life too afraid to try." "That's very brave. That's very tired." He gave a small, sad laugh. "I've been alone too long. Tired of talking to horses and sleeping in an empty house and going through the motions of living without actually being alive." Clara squeezed his hand. "I feel that way too sometimes. Like I've been holding my breath for 5 months, just waiting for something else terrible to happen." "Then maybe we both need to start breathing again." They sat in silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Clara didn't have answers, didn't have certainty, but for the first time in a long time, she had hope. And maybe that was enough. The warning came just after dawn on the 4th day. Clara was making breakfast when one of Jacob's men burst through the door, out of breath and wild-eyed. "They're coming! 6 riders, maybe an hour out. Shaw's at the front." Everything stopped. Clara looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at her. And in that shared glance, 1,000 words passed without being spoken. "Get the children to the cabin," Jacob said quietly. "Daniel." "I'm staying." Daniel was already reaching for his rifle. "We talked about this." "We did." Jacob's voice was grim. "Take a position in the loft. Don't fire unless I give the word or unless they fire first. Understand?" Daniel nodded and was gone. "Margaret," Clara pulled her oldest daughter close. "Take the others to the cabin. Keep them away from the windows. Whatever happens, do not come out until I come to get you. Do you understand?" Margaret's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Mama." "Samuel, Lily, you listen to your sister. No matter what you hear, you stay inside." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I'm scared, Mama." Clara knelt down, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. I know, baby. I'm scared too. But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Lily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Clara kissed her forehead, then her other children one by one. Ruth, last the baby who'd almost died in that blizzard, now squirming and healthy in Margaret's arms. I love you, Clara said. All of you. Never forget that. Then they were gone, and Clara was left standing in the kitchen with Jacob waiting for the storm to arrive. You should go with them. Jacob was loading his rifle with practiced efficiency. No. Clara! I said no. She grabbed Thomas's old pistol from the table. Shaw killed my husband, destroyed my home, tried to kill my children. I'm not hiding from him. I'm facing him. Jacob looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. Stay behind me. Don't say anything unless you have to. Let me do the talking. Since when are you good with words? Since right now, apparently. His mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. Ready. Clara checked the pistol, made sure it was loaded. Ready. They walked out onto the porch together to meet what was coming. The riders appeared over the ridge like a dark wave. 6 men, just as the scout had said. Victor Shaw in the lead, recognizable even at a distance by the way he sat his horse like a king surveying his domain. Rufus Crane rode at his side, the same dead-eyed man who'd delivered the eviction notice that started this nightmare. They stopped about 50 feet from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to draw if needed. Mr. Hartley? Shaw's voice was smooth-cultured, nothing like the monster Clara knew him to be. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Can't say it's a pleasure now. Jacob's tone was flat. You're on my land, Shaw. Uninvited. My apologies. I'm looking for someone. A woman and her children. I believe they've been staying with you. Lots of people stay with me. It's a big house. This particular woman has something that belongs to me. A journal. Her late husband's journal, to be specific. Shaw's eyes moved past Jacob to where Clara stood. Ah, Mrs. Whitmore. There you are. Clara stepped forward, ignoring Jacob's warning look. That journal belonged to my husband. It belongs to me now. I'm afraid I must disagree. Shaw's smile didn't reach his eyes. Thomas Whitmore stole certain documents from me before his unfortunate accident. I'd like them returned. You mean the evidence that you murdered him? The records proving you've been stealing land, bribing officials, destroying families? Clara's voice was shaking with rage. Those documents. Shaw's expression flickered. Just for a moment, but Clara saw it. He hadn't expected her to know what was in the journal. Mrs. Whitmore, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Jacob's voice cut through the air like a blade. I've seen the journal too. Read every page. Your name's all over it, Shaw. Dates, amounts, witnesses. Enough to see you hang. The air changed. Shaw's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something cold and calculating. That would be very unfortunate, for everyone involved. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Shaw leaned forward in his saddle. Mr. Hartley, you seem like a reasonable man. A rancher trying to make a living, same as anyone else. I'm willing to make you a very generous offer. Turn over the journal, send the woman and her children on their way, and I'll forget this conversation ever happened. You might even find your business improving. New contracts, better prices, favorable arrangements. And if I refuse, then things get complicated. Shaw's gaze swept over the property. Nice ranch you have here. Shame if something happened to it. Fire, maybe. Or cattle disease. Or an unfortunate accident like poor Mr. Whitmore. Jacob's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. You're threatening to kill me. I'm explaining consequences. There's a difference. Shaw straightened in his saddle. You have until tomorrow morning to reconsider. After that, he shrugged. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. He turned his horse and his men followed. Clara watched them ride away, her whole body trembling with fury and fear. He's going to come back, she said. He's going to come back with more men and burn everything. Probably. Then what do we do? We can't fight him off forever, and if we run, he'll just follow us again. We're not running. Jacob turned to face her. And we're not waiting until tomorrow. What do you mean? I mean we're leaving for Cheyenne tonight. You, me, and that journal. We ride through the night, get to Judge Harrison before Shaw realizes we're gone. What about the children? I can't leave them here. They'll come with us, all of them. My men will hold the ranch while we're gone. Jacob's voice was firm. It's risky. The roads are dangerous at night, and Shaw's men will be watching. But it's our best chance. And if we don't make it, then we go down fighting. Jacob took her hands, and his grip was warm and strong and steady. Clara, I ain't gonna let him win. Not after everything you've survived. Not after everything we've built here. We're going to make it to Cheyenne. We're going to give that journal to the judge. And we're going to watch Victor Shaw answer for every person he's hurt. Clara looked into his gray eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Certainty. Faith. The unshakable belief that right would prevail. She wanted to believe it too. All right, she said. We ride tonight. The preparations were frantic but thorough. Jacob's men would stay at the ranch, creating the illusion that everyone was still there. Clara packed only what they absolutely needed: food, water, blankets for the children. Nothing that would slow them down. Margaret accepted the plan with grim determination. Daniel argued that he should stay and fight until Clara pointed out that she needed him to protect his siblings on the road. Samuel was scared but trying to hide it. Lily clung to Clara's hand and didn't let go. They left at midnight under a sky so black the stars seemed close enough to touch. Clara rode with Ruth strapped to her chest and Lily seated in front of her. Jacob led the way with Samuel behind him. Daniel and Margaret brought up the rear, their horses trained to follow without guidance. The road was treacherous in the dark. More than once Clara felt her horse stumble, felt her heart stop, felt the certainty that this was the moment they'd fall and everything would end. But they kept moving, mile after mile, hour after hour. Dawn was breaking when Daniel's voice cut through the silence. Riders, behind us. Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked back and saw them, 3 figures in the distance moving fast. Shaw's men, Jacob said grimly. They spotted us. We need to move, now. They kicked their horses into a gallop. The children held on white-knuckled and terrified. Ruth started crying a thin wail that cut through the thunder of hooves. But the riders were gaining. There's a canyon up ahead, Jacob shouted. Narrow passage. If we can get through, we can lose them. They raced toward the canyon mouth, the world blurring past in a rush of rock and dust and fear. Clara could hear the riders behind them now, shouting, their horses screaming with effort. The canyon entrance loomed. They plunged into it, the walls rising on either side like prison bars. And then Jacob's horse went down. Clara screamed. She saw Jacob fly through the air, saw him hit the ground and roll, saw his horse scramble up with a broken leg and a whinny of agony. Keep going. Jacob's voice was ragged but clear. He was already on his feet, rifle in hand, positioning himself between the canyon mouth and the riders beyond. Get to Cheyenne. Don't stop for anything. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. He looked at her, and his gray eyes held everything he hadn't said, everything he might never get to say. Clara, go. Now. For them. She looked at her children. At Ruth crying in her arms. At Lily's terrified face. At Daniel reaching for his own rifle with hands that shook. She made her choice. Daniel, take your sisters. Don't stop until you reach the judge. Tell him everything. Mama, no. Go. Daniel's face crumbled, but he obeyed. He grabbed Lily's reins, Margaret's reins, and they were gone, disappearing into the canyon's shadows. Clara turned her horse around. Jacob stared at her. "What are you doing?" She dismounted, settling Ruth into a protected hollow between the rocks. Drew Thomas's pistol. "I told you," she said. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm fighting." The riders burst through the canyon mouth. 3 men with guns drawn and murder in their eyes. Clara stood beside Jacob, pistol raised, heart pounding. This was it. Whatever happened now would decide everything. She pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, kicking up dust near the lead rider's horse. Clara's hands were shaking too hard for accuracy, but it didn't matter. Jacob's rifle cracked a half-second later, and the first man tumbled from his saddle with a cry that echoed off the canyon walls. 2 left. They scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and scrub brush. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining past Clara's head close enough that she felt the wind of their passage. "Get down!" Jacob grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a boulder. "Stay low. I can fight. You can die is what you can do shooting like that." His voice was harsh, but his eyes were terrified. Not for himself. For her. "Just stay down and reload. I'll handle this." He rose, fired twice, ducked back, as return fire chipped stone inches from his face. Clara fumbled with the pistol, her fingers clumsy with fear and cold. "One of them's circling left," Jacob muttered, peering around the boulder. "Trying to flank us." "What do we do?" "You stay here. I'm going to—" A bullet tore through his shoulder. Jacob spun his rifle, flying from his hands, blood spraying across the rocks. He went down hard, and Clara screamed his name, scrambling toward him without thinking about cover or bullets or anything except the fact that he was bleeding. He was hurt. He might be dying. "Jacob! Jacob! Look at me!" His eyes were open, his jaw clenched against the pain. "I'm fine. Just a graze." "That's not a graze, that's—" "Clara!" His bloody hand gripped her arm. "Behind you!" She spun. One of Shaw's men stood 10 feet away, pistol leveled at her head. Young face. Dead eyes. Finger tightening on the trigger. Clara didn't think. She raised Thomas's pistol and fired. The man dropped. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking. She'd just killed someone. Killed a man. Watched the life leave his eyes. Watched him crumple like a puppet with cut strings. "Clara!" Jacob's voice pulled her back. "Clara. There's still one more." She turned, looking frantically for the 3rd rider. But the canyon was silent now. No movement, no shots. Then she heard hoofbeats. Retreating. Getting fainter. "He's running," she breathed. "He's going back to Shaw." "Which means Shaw knows we're coming now. Knows we're close." Jacob tried to sit up, grimacing. "We have to move. If we can get to Cheyenne before—" "You're not going anywhere with that shoulder." "Don't have a choice." He struggled to his feet, swaying badly. "Daniel and the others are ahead of us. If Shaw's man catches up to them before they reach the judge—" Clara's blood turned to ice. Her children. Out there alone. With a killer riding to intercept them. She grabbed Jacob's rifle from the ground. Checked the load. "Can you ride?" "I can try." "Then try." They found his horse. The animal had recovered from its stumble, though it was limping slightly. Clara helped Jacob into the saddle, watched him sway, watched him grab the pommel with white-knuckled determination. "Ruth." His voice was strained. "The baby." Clara ran back to the hollow where she'd hidden her daughter. Ruth was crying, her small face red with distress, but she was alive. Unhurt. Clara gathered her up, pressed her close, felt the warmth of her baby's body against her chest. "I've got you," she whispered. "Mama's got you." They rode. Jacob's wound bled through the bandage Clara had improvised from her petticoat. She could see him weakening with every mile, his face going gray, his grip on the reins loosening. But he didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Kept pushing forward with the same stubborn determination that had carried her through 5 months of hell. "Talk to me," Clara said, riding close beside him. "Stay awake." "I'm awake." "Then talk. Tell me something. Anything." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, through gritted teeth, "Mary would have liked you." "Your wife?" "Yeah. A ghost of a smile crossed his pain-creased face. She always said I needed someone stubborn enough to match me. Said I'd walk all over anyone who couldn't hold their ground. She sounds like she knew you well. Better than I knew myself. Jacob's eyes were distant, focused on something Clara couldn't see. When she died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd never feel anything again. Didn't want to. What changed? You did. He looked at her, then really looked, and despite the blood and the pain and the desperate ride through hostile territory, something soft crept into his expression. You and those kids walked into my life like a storm and didn't give me any choice but to feel again. Clara's throat tightened. Jacob, I ain't saying this expecting anything back, just needed you to know. He winced, pressing his hand harder against his shoulder. Case I don't get another chance to say it. You're going to have plenty of chances. We're going to make it to Cheyenne, and the judge is going to arrest Shaw, and you're going to have a doctor stitch that shoulder, and then what? Clara didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was, she didn't know what came after. Didn't know how to imagine a future where they weren't running, weren't fighting, weren't just trying to survive until tomorrow. Then we figure it out, she said finally. Together. Jacob's hand found hers. Squeezed once. Didn't let go. They rode on. The sun was high overhead when they spotted the riders ahead. Clara's heart stopped. 4 figures on horseback moving slowly along the road toward Cheyenne. Too far away to identify, but too close together to be strangers. Is that? Can't tell. Jacob squinted against the light. Could be Daniel and the others. Could be Shaw's men. We have to know. Clara, if it's a trap. But she was already kicking her horse forward, closing the distance, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. If it was her children, they were safe. If it wasn't Mama, Lily's voice. Lily's small figure turning in the saddle and waving frantically. Behind her, Daniel and Margaret and Samuel, all of them alive, all of them whole. Clara reached them in a blur of tears and relief, dismounting before her horse fully stopped, gathering Lily into her arms and holding on like she'd never let go. You're safe. Thank God you're safe. We heard shooting. Daniel's face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried tears. We wanted to come back, but Margaret said, Margaret was right. Clara cupped her son's face in her hands. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You protected your siblings. Is Mr. Hartley... Margaret's voice broke off as she saw Jacob slumped in his saddle. Oh no. Oh no, he's hurt. He'll be fine. We just need to get to Cheyenne. How much farther? Maybe 5 miles. Daniel pointed toward the horizon. We could see the buildings before we stopped to wait. 5 miles. Just 5 more miles. Then let's go. Clara mounted again, Ruth still strapped against her chest. Stay together. Don't stop for anything. They rode those last 5 miles in a kind of fevered dream. Clara kept looking over her shoulder, expecting Shaw's men to appear at any moment. Jacob grew quieter, his responses slower, the blood soaking through his bandage, turning his shirt crimson. But they made it. Cheyenne rose up before them, like a promise. Wooden buildings, bustling streets, people going about their lives with no idea that a desperate family was riding toward them carrying evidence that could bring down an empire. The courthouse. Jacob's voice was barely a whisper now. Harrison's office is in the courthouse, east side of the square. They found it. A solid brick building with columns out front and the territorial seal above the door. Clara dismounted, handed Ruth to Margaret, and helped Jacob down from his horse. Stay here, she told her children. All of you. Don't move until I come back. Mama. I mean it, Daniel. This is almost over. Don't do anything to jeopardize it now. She half-carried Jacob up the courthouse steps, through the doors, past a startled clerk who tried to stop them. Ma'am, you can't just... I need to see Judge Harrison. Now. It's a matter of life and death. The judge is in a meeting. Then interrupt it. The clerk sputtered, But Clara was already moving, pushing through doors, following signs, until she found an office with Harrison's name on the brass plate. She didn't knock, just burst through. A white-haired man in judicial robes looked up from his desk, startled. "What in God's name, Judge Harrison?" Clara's voice was raw, desperate. "My name is Clara Whitmore. My husband was Thomas Whitmore. He was murdered by Victor Shaw 5 months ago, and I have evidence to prove it." The judge's expression shifted from irritation to interest. "Shaw, Victor Shaw." "Yes." Clara reached into her dress, pulled out the blood-stained journal. Shaw's men's blood. Jacob's blood she couldn't tell anymore, and slammed it on the desk. "Everything's in here. Names, dates, witnesses. Everything you need to arrest him." Harrison picked up the journal, opened it, and his eyes went wide. "Dear God, this is enough to hang him, I know." Clara felt her legs starting to buckle. "Please, my family has been running for 5 months. Shaw tried to kill us last night. His men shot this man." She gestured at Jacob, who was sagging against the doorframe, "trying to stop us from reaching you. Please, you have to help us." The judge was already moving, shouting for his clerk, barking orders that Clara couldn't quite follow. Someone took Jacob's weight from her shoulders. Someone led her to a chair. Someone pressed a glass of water into her trembling hands. And then she heard the words she'd been praying to hear for 5 months. "Send a wire to the territorial marshal. I want Victor Shaw arrested on charges of murder, land fraud, and conspiracy. As of this moment, he is a wanted man." Clara closed her eyes and let herself cry. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements and official documents. Clara told her story 3 times to the judge, to a clerk, to a stern-faced marshal who'd ridden in from the next territory. Each time she forced herself to remember details she'd tried to forget: Thomas's face when he left that morning, the sound of Crane's voice delivering the news, the cold calculation in Shaw's eyes when he threatened her children. By the time they finally let her go, the sun was setting and her voice was gone. "Your family's been taken to the hotel across the square." Judge Harrison walked her to the courthouse door himself. "The territorial government will cover your expenses until this matter is resolved. And Mrs. Whitmore." He stopped, his weathered face softening. "Your husband was a brave man. He died trying to do the right thing. I hope knowing that brings you some comfort." "It does." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you. Thank you. Without that journal, Shaw would have continued destroying families for years. You've saved more lives than you know." Clara found her children in the hotel lobby, huddled together on a worn velvet sofa. Lily was asleep against Margaret's shoulder. Samuel was pretending not to cry. Daniel stood as soon as he saw her, his young face tight with worry. "Mama! What happened? Is it over?" "It's over." Clara gathered them all close, one arm around Daniel, one around Margaret, the younger ones pressing in from every side. "Shaw's being arrested. We're safe. It's finally over. And Mr. Hartley." Margaret's voice was small. "Is he?" "The doctor's with him now. He lost a lot of blood, but they think he'll be all right." Daniel made a sound relief, maybe, or something more complicated. "Can we see him?" "Tomorrow. Right now we all need to rest." But Clara didn't rest. She waited until the children were settled in their room, until their breathing had gone slow and even with sleep, and then she slipped out. The doctor's office was 3 doors down from the hotel. Clara stood outside for a long moment, gathering her courage before finally pushing through the door. Jacob was awake. He lay on a narrow bed, his shoulder heavily bandaged, his face nearly as white as the pillowcase. But his eyes were clear, and when he saw her, something like joy flickered across his features. "Clara, you should be resting." "Couldn't sleep. Kept worrying." He tried to shift, winced, and gave up. "The children. Safe. All of them. Ruth's sleeping like she hasn't slept in months. And Shaw. Being arrested as we speak. The judge sent men to his ranch with warrants for everything. Murder, fraud, all of it." Clara moved closer, sinking into the chair beside his bed. "It's over, Jacob. Really over." He closed his eyes, let out a breath that seemed to carry months of tension with it. "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "Back in that canyon. When you turned around instead of running. Scared like I ain't been scared since Mary died. I couldn't leave you." "You should have. You had children depending on you. I had a man depending on me too." Clara took his hand, felt his fingers curl around hers. A man who risked everything for a family that wasn't even his. A man who looked at a widow with 5 children and saw something worth saving. "Worth loving," Jacob corrected softly, though I wasn't sure I was allowed to say it yet. Clara's breath caught. "Jacob, I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving. I know there's 1,000 reasons why this is complicated and difficult and probably foolish." His gray eyes found hers. "But I also know I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't feel what I feel." "And what do you feel?" "Like I found something I didn't know I was looking for." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Like maybe God really does send angels to folks who need them. Like maybe Mary was right all along and being kind is worth the cost, because sometimes it leads you somewhere beautiful." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I loved Thomas with everything I had, and losing him nearly destroyed me. I don't know if I can survive that kind of loss again." "I know. I feel the same way." Jacob's grip tightened on her hand. "But Clara, I'd rather have whatever time God gives us, a year, a decade, 50 years, than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. That's either very brave or very foolish. Probably both." A faint smile crossed his face. "Mary always said I was stubborn as a mule, and twice as stupid about things that mattered." Clara laughed despite herself, a wet, broken sound that released something that had been wound tight in her chest for 5 long months. "All right," she said. Jacob blinked. "All right, what?" "All right, I'll stay. All right, we'll figure this out together. All right, I'll let myself feel what I've been trying not to feel since the day you pulled my family out of that blizzard." Clara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "All right, Jacob Hartley, I'm yours, if you'll have me." "If I'll have you." His voice cracked with emotion. "Clara, I've been yours since the moment I found you in that barn. I just didn't know how to say it." She kissed him then, gently mindful of his injury, but with a certainty she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. His good hand came up to cup her face, and for a long moment there was nothing in the world except the two of them and the promise of something new. When she finally pulled back, Jacob's eyes were bright with tears he was too stubborn to shed. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Clara smiled, "now you rest. And tomorrow, when the doctor says you can travel, we go home." Home. He tested the word like it was new. The ranch. "Our home." Clara squeezed his hand. "Yours, mine, and 5 children who've been waiting a long time for a place to belong." "Reckon I can live with that." "You better, because I'm not letting you go now that I've found you." Jacob's smile was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Whitmore." "That's going to change," Clara said quietly. "The name, I mean. If you meant what you said, about all of it." Jacob's expression went serious, tender. "I meant every word. But Clara, I ain't asking for anything until you're ready. We can take as much time as you need. I don't want time." The words came out stronger than she expected. "I've had 5 months of time. 5 months of running, of being afraid of watching my children suffer. I'm done waiting for life to hurt me again." She took a breath. "I want to start living. With you. As soon as possible." "Is that a proposal, Mrs. Whitmore?" "I believe it is, Mr. Hartley." Jacob laughed, a real laugh, deep and warm and full of joy. Then I believe I accept." Clara stayed with him until he fell asleep, his hand still holding hers, his breathing finally even and peaceful. She watched him sleep and let herself imagine the future for the first time in months. A home, a family, a man who loved her children as his own. Thomas would approve, she thought. He'd wanted her to be happy, wanted the children to have a father who would protect them. Jacob Hartley was that man. And tomorrow they would begin their new life together. The news of Victor Shaw's arrest spread through the territory like wildfire. Clara heard the story secondhand from the marshal's deputies, from the hotel clerk, from strangers who stopped her on the street to shake her hand. Shaw had been found at his ranch, surrounded by armed men, convinced he could buy or shoot his way out of trouble. He'd been wrong. The territorial marshals had come with warrants and rifles and the full weight of the law behind them. Shaw's men had scattered like rats. Shaw himself had tried to run, but they'd caught him before he reached the border. He was in chains now, waiting for trial, waiting for justice. "They say he'll hang," Daniel reported at breakfast 3 days after their arrival in Cheyenne. "The marshal told me there's enough evidence to convict him 10 times over." "Good." Margaret's voice was fierce. "He deserves worse." "Margaret," Clara's tone was gentle but firm. "We don't celebrate death, not even his. I'm not celebrating. I'm just—" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "He killed Papa. He almost killed all of us. How are we supposed to feel anything but hate?" Clara reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. "You're supposed to feel whatever you feel. Angry, sad, relieved, all of it. There's no right way to grieve, baby. No right way to heal. Do you hate him, Mama?" Clara was quiet for a moment. She thought about Thomas, about the life they'd built together, about the brutal way it had been torn apart. She thought about Shaw's cold eyes and colder heart. "I did," she admitted. "For a long time, hate was the only thing keeping me going. But now—" She looked around the table at her children. Daniel trying so hard to be strong, Margaret holding everything together. Samuel pretending nothing bothered him. Lily watching with those big eyes, Ruth babbling happily in her high chair. "Now I think I'd rather use that energy for love, for building something new instead of tearing myself apart over something I can't change." "That sounds like something Mr. Hartley would say," Samuel observed. Clara smiled. "Maybe it is. Speaking of Mr. Hartley," Daniel's voice was careful, measured. "When are you going to tell us what's happening with him?" The table went silent. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on Clara with varying degrees of curiosity and hope. "What do you mean, Mama?" Margaret's tone was exasperated. "We're not blind. We saw you come back from the doctor's office last night. We saw your face. Something happened." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd underestimated her children as usual. They saw everything, understood more than she gave them credit for. "Mr. Hartley and I have been talking," she said slowly. "About the future, about what happens when we go home." "Home meaning his ranch?" Daniel asked. "Our ranch. If—" Clara took a breath. "If you all agree to it." "Agree to what exactly?" "He's asked me to marry him." The silence stretched. Clara watched her children's faces, trying to read their reactions. Daniel's jaw tightened. Margaret's eyes went wide. Samuel looked confused. Lily started bouncing in her seat. "Does that mean Mr. Jacob would be our papa?" Lily asked. "It would mean he'd be your stepfather. Your papa will always be your papa. Nothing changes that." Clara's voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "But yes, Jacob would be part of our family, officially." "I knew it." Samuel punched the air. "I told Margaret something was going on. She said I was imagining things." "I said you were being nosy," Margaret corrected. "Which you were." "Children," Clara held up her hand. "This isn't a decision I'm making alone. It affects all of us. If any of you are uncomfortable with this, if you need more time, I need to know." Daniel was quiet. His face was unreadable, his shoulders tight. Clara's heart sank. "Daniel, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking." He stopped, started again. "I'm thinking Papa would want you to be happy. I'm thinking Mr. Hartley's a good man, even if I didn't want to admit it at first. I'm thinking—" His voice cracked. "I'm thinking maybe it's okay to let someone else help carry the weight." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Sweetheart, I spent 5 months trying to be the man of the family, trying to be Papa. And I couldn't do it. I wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't—" Daniel wiped his face roughly. "Mr. Hartley never tried to replace Papa. He just tried to help. And maybe that's what we need. Someone who helps without trying to replace what we lost. So, you're okay with this?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mama. I'm okay with it." "Me too," Margaret said softly. "Me 3, Samuel added. "Me 4, Lily shouted, then frowned. "Wait, that's not right." Even Ruth seemed to agree, banging her spoon against her high-chair tray with enthusiastic approval. Clara laughed through her tears. "Then I guess it's settled." "When's the wedding?" Margaret asked, suddenly practical. "We'll need dresses, and flowers, and—" "Slow down." Clara held up her hand. "Jacob needs to recover first, and we need to go home, get settled, figure out what normal looks like." "Normal." Daniel tested the word. "I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." "Then we'll learn together." Clara reached out, gathered as many of her children into her arms as she could reach. "All of us. Together." They went home 5 days later. Jacob's shoulder was healing well, though the doctor had insisted on a sling and strict orders not to do any heavy lifting for at least a month. Clara had expected him to argue. Instead, he'd just nodded and said, "Reckon that means you'll have to boss me around for a while longer, Mrs. Whitmore." "I prefer to think of it as managing your recovery, Mr. Hartley." Same thing in my experience. The journey home was nothing like the desperate flight they'd made in the opposite direction. The weather had cleared, the roads were passable, and for the first time in months, Clara didn't feel like she was running from something. She felt like she was running toward it. The ranch appeared on the horizon on the 3rd day, and Clara felt her throat tighten at the sight of it. The house where she'd nursed Ruth back from the brink of death. The barn where she'd first realized Jacob was more than just a kind stranger. The cabin where her children had started to become children again, instead of tiny survivors. Home. "It's still standing." Jacob's voice was dry. "That's something." "Were you worried?" "Left the place in the hands of 2 ranch hands who drink more than they work. Had reason to be concerned." But when they rode into the yard, both men were there to meet them. Sober, relieved, and full of news about the ranch's survival, and Shaw's men who'd come sniffing around, but been scared off by the rumor that the territorial marshals were on their way. "You did good," Jacob told them, shaking hands with genuine gratitude. "Both of you. I won't forget it." "Just glad you made it back, boss. All of you." The older hand, Ezra, looked at Clara and the children with something like warmth. "Place was too quiet without the young'uns running around." "Don't worry," Samuel said cheerfully. "We're loud." "That's the truth," Daniel muttered, but he was smiling. The first few weeks back were an adjustment. Jacob was limited by his injury, which meant the older children took on more responsibility than ever. Daniel worked alongside Ezra and the other hand learning skills that would serve him the rest of his life. Margaret ran the household with an efficiency that amazed everyone. Even Samuel found his niche, discovering a talent for working with the horses that nobody had expected. Clara watched her family settle into this new life and felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments and frustrations and moments when grief crept up unexpectedly and stole the breath from someone's lungs. Ruth's first tooth came in during a snowstorm that kept them housebound for 3 days. Lily asked about Thomas at odd moments, wanting to know if he was watching from heaven, If he was proud of them, if he missed them as much as they missed him. "I think he's watching," Clara told her daughter on one of those nights. "I think he sees how brave you've been, and I think he's very, very proud." "Does he know about Mr. Jacob?" "I think so." "Is he sad that we have a new papa?" Clara pulled Lily close, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the small, warm weight of her daughter against her chest. "I think he's glad. I think he's glad we found someone to take care of us when he couldn't anymore." "I think so too." Lily snuggled closer. "Mr. Jacob is nice. Papa would like him." "Yeah, baby. I think he would." The wedding happened on a Sunday in early spring when the snow had finally melted and the first wildflowers were pushing up through the thawed ground. They kept it simple. Just family and a few neighbors who'd come to accept the strange household that had formed at Jacob's ranch. The reverend from town, a different man than the one who'd turned them away in Bitter Creek. Kinder and less judgmental, performed the ceremony on the front porch with the whole prairie spread out behind them like a blessing. Clara wore a dress Margaret had helped her alter from one of Mary's old gowns. She'd hesitated when Jacob suggested it, worried about wearing his dead wife's clothes, but he'd taken her hand and said, Mary would have wanted her things to be useful. She wasn't sentimental about fabric. She was sentimental about love. So Clara wore the dress, and when she walked toward Jacob, she felt Mary's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Not jealous, not possessive, just kind. The same kindness Jacob had described so many times. "You look beautiful," Jacob said when she reached him, his voice rough with emotion. "You don't look so bad yourself. Cleaned up for the occasion. I noticed." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Clara spoke her vows with a clear voice, promising to love and honor and cherish this man who'd given her family a second chance. Jacob spoke his with that quiet intensity she'd come to love, promising to protect and provide and stand beside her through whatever storms life sent their way. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the Reverend asked. "I do." Jacob's eyes never left Clara's face. "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife." The Reverend smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Jacob cupped Clara's face in his hands, both hands, now his shoulder finally healed, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Behind them, the children cheered. Lily was loudest. "Does this mean we can call him Papa now?" she demanded when the kiss ended. Clara looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at her. Something passed between them, permission maybe, or just shared understanding. "If you want to," Clara said. "It's up to each of you." "I want to." Lily threw herself at Jacob's legs, hugging him fiercely. "You're my papa now. My second papa." Jacob knelt down, gathering the little girl into his arms. His eyes were wet when he looked up at Clara over Lily's head. "That's the best thing anyone's ever called me." One by one the other children approached. Samuel first awkward but sincere, offering a handshake that Jacob turned into a hug. Margaret next whispering something in Jacob's ear that made him laugh and nod and hold her tight. Daniel hung back. Clara watched him struggle with something, pride maybe, or the last remnants of his resistance. Then he stepped forward, and when he spoke his voice was thick with emotion. "I want you to know something." Daniel stood straight, meeting Jacob's eyes directly. "I didn't trust you at first. Didn't want to trust you. Thought if I let myself care about you I'd be betraying Papa." "Daniel, let me finish." Daniel took a breath. "But I've been watching you for months now. Watched how you treat Mama, how you are with the little ones, how you never tried to replace Papa, just stood beside us, helped us." His voice cracked. "That's what a father does. Not the blood, the standing beside." Jacob's jaw tightened. He blinked hard. "So if it's all right with you," Daniel continued, "I'd like to call you Pa. Not Papa, that's Lily's word. And it belonged to my father first. But Pa, something new. Something that's just ours. Daniel. Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. I'd be honored. Daniel nodded once, then did something Clara had never seen him do with anyone except Thomas. He stepped forward and embraced Jacob, fully holding on like he was anchoring himself to solid ground after years at sea. Clara watched her oldest son and her new husband hold each other and felt the last piece of her broken heart finally mend. The months that followed were the happiest Clara had known since before Thomas's death. The ranch thrived. With Jacob's guidance and the children's help, they expanded the cattle operation, added more chickens, planted a bigger garden. The cabin that Clara and the children had first lived in was converted into a guest house, and the whole family moved into the main building together. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was everything Jacob's house had been missing for 4 years. I don't know how I ever lived here alone, he said one evening watching Samuel and Lily argue about who got to sit closest to the fireplace while Margaret mediated and Daniel pretended not to care. It must have been so quiet. Do you miss the quiet? Not for 1 second. Jacob pulled Clara close, pressing a kiss to her temple. This is what a home sounds like. Ruth took her first steps on a warm spring afternoon, wobbling from Clara's arms to Jacob's across the kitchen floor. The whole family cheered so loudly that she burst into tears, which made them laugh, which made her laugh, and soon everyone was crying and laughing at once. She walked to you, Clara said to Jacob that night after the children were asleep and the house was finally still. Her first steps were toward you. Reckon she knows a good thing when she sees it. Reckon she does. Summer brought news from Cheyenne. Victor Shaw had been tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang. Clara read the letter from Judge Harrison with mixed emotions. Relief that justice had been served. Sadness that it had taken so much loss to get there. Do you want to go? Jacob asked. To the hanging. Clara thought about it. Thought about watching the man who'd destroyed her first life take his final breath. Thought about the satisfaction it might bring. Then she thought about her children, about the life they'd built, about the future stretching out before them full of possibility. No, she said finally. I've spent enough time looking backward. I'd rather focus on what's ahead. Jacob nodded, like he'd expected that answer. Then we will. Fall brought the anniversary of Thomas's death. Clara woke early that morning, slipped out of bed without waking Jacob, and walked out to the small hill behind the house where they'd placed a memorial stone. There was no body buried there. Thomas's grave was back in the town that had betrayed them, but it was a place to remember, to honor what had been. I miss you, Clara said to the stone. I'll always miss you. The wind stirred the grass around her feet. The children are doing well. Daniel's almost a man now. Margaret's talking about becoming a school teacher. Samuel's found his calling with horses. Lily's still Lily, too smart for her own good and twice as stubborn. And Ruth. Clara smiled through her tears. Ruth is walking and talking and getting into everything. You'd love her, Thomas. You'd love who she's becoming. She knelt down, placed her hand on the stone. I married again. His name is Jacob. He's a good man, different from you, but good. He loves me, loves our children, takes care of us the way you would have. Clara's voice broke. I hope you understand. I hope you know I didn't forget you. I could never forget you. But I couldn't stop living either. The children needed me. I needed to believe there was still joy to be found. He knows. Clara turned. Jacob stood a few feet away, his expression gentle. You shouldn't sneak up on people, she said, wiping her face. Wasn't sneaking, just didn't want to interrupt. He moved closer, knelt beside her. But Clara, I believe he knows. And I believe he's grateful you found happiness again. How can you be sure? Because that's what I'd want for Mary. If she'd survived, and I hadn't. Jacob looked at the memorial stone. I'd want her to keep living, to find love again, to fill our house with noise and chaos and joy. He took Clara's hand. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes, makes room for more. Clara leaned into him, let him hold her while she cried for the man she'd lost, and the life she'd found, and the impossible gift of getting to experience both. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." Jacob kissed the top of her head. "Both of you." Winter came again, and with it, the first anniversary of the blizzard that had brought them together. The family gathered around the fireplace after dinner, and Jacob produced a bottle of cider he'd been saving for a special occasion. "1 year," he said, pouring small glasses for everyone. "1 year since I found the most stubborn woman in Wyoming collapsed in my barn with 5 half-frozen children and a dying baby." "I wasn't collapsed," Clara protested. "I was resting." "You were unconscious." "That's a form of resting." The children laughed, and Clara felt her heart swell with love for all of them, for the family she'd been born into, for the family she'd created, for the family she'd found against all odds in the middle of a storm. "I want to make a toast," Daniel said, standing up with his glass. At 16 now, he was nearly as tall as Jacob, with shoulders that spoke of hard work, and a face that had finally lost its constant tension. "To the people who saved us. To Mama, who never gave up. To Pa, who took us in when nobody else would. And to all of us for surviving." "To surviving," the others echoed. "And to thriving," Margaret added. "Because we're not just surviving anymore. We're living." "To living," Clara agreed, raising her glass. They drank together, and then Lily demanded songs, and soon the whole family was singing badly mostly, but with enthusiasm that made up for the lack of talent. Jacob's deep voice anchored the melody, while the children wove harmonies around it, and Clara listened and sang and laughed until her sides ached. Later, after the children had finally been wrangled into bed and the house had settled into quiet, Clara stood on the porch, looking up at the stars. The same stars she'd watched that first night, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake by staying. Now, she knew the answer. "What are you thinking?" Jacob asked, appearing beside her with a blanket that he wrapped around her shoulders. "I'm thinking about that night in the canyon, when Shaw's men were chasing us, and you told me to run." "And you didn't." "No, I didn't." Clara turned to face him. "I've been thinking about why. At the time I told myself it was because I couldn't leave you to face them alone. But now I think it was something else." "What?" "I think it was the first time I chose something for myself since Thomas died. Not just survival, not just protecting the children, but an actual choice about who I wanted to be." Clara's voice was steady. "I chose to be someone who stands and fights. Someone who doesn't run away from love just because it might hurt." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled her close, and she felt his heart beating against her cheek. "That's the woman I fell in love with," he said. "The one who wouldn't quit. The one who looked at impossible odds and said, 'I'll take those odds, thank you very much.' I didn't say it quite like that." "Close enough." Clara laughed softly. Then she looked up at him, at this man who'd given her family a second chance, who'd opened his heart to 5 children, who weren't his blood, who'd proved every day that love wasn't about where you started, but about who you chose. "I love you, Jacob Hartley." "I love you too, Clara Hartley." He grinned. "Still getting used to that name. You and me both." They stood together under the stars, wrapped in the same blanket, breathing the same cold air, living the same life that neither of them had expected, but both of them had chosen. And in that moment, Clara understood something she'd been struggling to articulate since the day she'd stumbled into Jacob's barn with 5 dying children and a heart full of despair. Family wasn't about blood. It wasn't about last names or legal documents or the circumstances of your birth. Family was about showing up, about standing beside each other when the storms came, about choosing every single day to love the people in front of you with everything you had. She'd lost her first family to violence and greed. She'd built her second family through desperation and grace. And she'd learned that both kinds of family were real. Both kinds mattered. Both kinds were worth fighting for. Mama. A small voice from the doorway. Lily rubbing her eyes, blanket trailing behind her. I can't sleep. Clara opened her arms, and her daughter ran into them. Jacob scooped them both up, carried them inside to the warmth and light of the home they'd built together. Behind them, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small dramas of human hearts. But Clara didn't need the stars to care. She had everything she needed right here, a husband who loved her children, who were thriving a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. Once a little girl had said that nobody wanted her mama because she had too many kids. Now that little girl had a father who'd looked at all of them and said the only words that mattered. I want all of you. And he'd meant every word. Clara Hartley, widow mother survivor, and finally at peace, held her daughter close, leaned into her husband's strength, and let herself believe in happy endings. Not because they were guaranteed, not because life wouldn't bring more storms, but because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that love was worth the risk, family was worth the fight, and sometimes the best things in life came not from what you were born into, but from what you were brave enough to choose. And Clara had chosen well.